Helen Welch, welcome back to the Idea Stream Studios.
Thank you, David C. Nice to be here.
I understand a number of years ago you had a gig at Nighttown, and during your set you sang a song by the late Karen Carpenter,
Yes.
and I hear you were surprised by the audience response.
Yes, I tell this story during the show, actually, and it's part of the reason why I developed the show. So we were on stage. It was a particularly noisy night. There was a table of about 10 people who were not at Nighttown for the music, and I couldn't hear myself think. So I'd had this piece of music in my collection. I had never sung it live, and it was the song I Won't Last a Day Without You. And I turned to the band and I said, let's do this. And they all laughed and said, a Carpenter's song? And I said, well, why not? Nobody's listening. And so I began to sing this song, and within about 50 seconds, you could hear a pin drop. I will never forget it. And at the end of the song, there was this rapturous applause. People went nuts. The next day, and I was new to the area, bear in mind, at this time, so I didn't really know about all the venues in Northeast Ohio. We arrived at the venue, and I very quickly realized perhaps wasn't the best venue for me. It was a very nice biker bar, and we went in, and the band said, jokingly, why don't you do a Carpenter song? And I said, okay. So we did the same song, and within about 30 seconds, you could hear a pin drop. But not only that.
Even there, you heard a pin drop.
And they all sang along.
You refer to yourself as a CCF, Closet Carpenter fan. And that suggests that the Carpenters are kind of a guilty pleasure for many people. Why do you suppose that is?
You know, there could be a whole book written on that, I think. And I would like to put that in the past tense. I was a CCF. I'm now out.
You're full out.
Yes.
Right.
Why? I think it was because they were making music at a time when the music business was changing. And the Beatles broke up. It was the Rolling Stones and Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin and the Carpenters. And so they filled this gap, this sort of romantic love song gap that was missing at the time, but it wasn't cool. So it was brother and sister singing love songs and harmonies, and yet somehow they touched the hearts of millions of people, and it wasn't just here or just England, it was worldwide. And what's so funny is that sort of Closet Carpenters fan seems to be prevalent wherever I go.
I understand that you were listening to your mom's cassettes of the Carpenters.
Yeah.
Is that how you started?
Yeah, I grew up in a family where my mother was a light opera singer, and my dad, after 25 years in the army, retrained as a computer programmer, met my mum, but was also a very proficient flamenco and jazz guitarist who didn't like singers. Not the best marriage in the world.
Wow.
But anyway, so I had this really crazy different genres of music, but my mum would listen to the Carpenters. As far as she was concerned, really singing-wise, and the only thing available really in those days was classical singing, but I borrowed her tapes, and I would sing along with Karen, and I would think, well, I can do this, but if I try going to singing lessons and singing Italian arias, I feel like a round peg in a square hole. I can't do that. So I actually thought I couldn't sing. So I just sang in my bedroom into my hairbrush along with Karen, thinking that I sounded a little like her and she made a living doing this, so it must be okay. But, I was really young, and it really is because of her, probably, that I pursued a career, eventually had the confidence to go out and sing what I wanted to sing the way I wanted to sing it.
You came to realize, I suppose, later as you got musical training that you were both altos.
Yes, and they seem to be a little more rare than the soprano, just as tenor singers are more rare than baritones.
She did stand out on the radio because of that.
Right, and yes, and some people call her the finest alto singer that ever lived. And funnily enough, when I got a call from the Cleveland Orchestra after I moved here to sing at Blossom, I was so excited about the prospect of singing with the orchestra, but my first concern was, oh my gosh, I'm not a soprano. So I thought, I can't say yes and then them give me music I can't sing. So I said to the conductor, you do know that I'm not a soprano and I'm an alto. And he said, darling, sopranos make my fillings rattle. I said, okay. Oh, good. So yes, I call myself an unfashionable alto.
So you have all this background. You have a kind of an inkling that probably a lot of people like the Carpenters, and then you take it to the next step of I'm going to put together a performance of this. Talk about the beginnings of that.
So, well, you were a little part of that. You actually were a very big part of it.
This was I feel like we were talking about this 10 years ago.
Yes, it was about 10 years ago.
What took so long?
Well, I haven't been static in 10 years.
I know you have not, for sure.
So I talked to you about it, and I know you thought it was a cool idea, because I wanted to make sure I wasn't going nuts, that maybe out there, and somebody like you that really knows about the business thought it was a good idea. Then the idea of doing this, David, I've produced a lot of different shows, but the Carpenters is unlike anything else because their music is so complex. It's not just throwing together 4 people and just regurgitating the songs. It's not that simple. There's all these amazing harmonies and strings and oboes and French horns. How am I going to do this without involving a 70-piece orchestra and do this so I can perform it? Mm-hmm. So the first thing I did was I tried to copy. And so I brought in 2 keyboards. We tried to transfer some of the orchestral lines onto a second keyboard. And we performed the show at the Akron Civic and a couple of other venues. And it was very successful. People loved it. But it just didn't feel right to me because that's not the person, that's not the artist I am.
You were doing a dead copy of
Pretty
her?
much.
Yeah, okay.
Pretty much.
Okay.
So and it was hard work, to get this thing together and get it rehearsed and to keep it rolling, and with all these things that needed to be involved in the show. And then the bottom dropped out of the economy. Theatres don't want to spend that much. And I just kind of went, there's other things. I was getting booked to sing with symphony orchestras and big bands, and I was busy. And so I just kind of went off and did my thing. I performed the show a couple of other times at Lakeside, at the Civic again, because we kept selling out the Civic with it. So we did it again, and it just didn't taste right. And then in 2016, I was producing my album Spellbound. And that came in under the nose of a big publicist in California called Michael Jensen, who looked at my website and said, I see you do a Carpenters show. Tell me about that. So I sort of told him what I've told you. And I went back to the drawing board with my musical director, Joe Lehman, and I said, why are we doing it like that? That's not what we do. We are a great band. We love taking songs and producing them the way we would do them. Let's do what we're good at. And so we started rearranging the songs, not all of them, but making them fit what we do. Piano, live piano, electric bass, guitar, drums, percussion, and voices. They all sing. And we did, I contacted Howard Parr. We got the show, I finished the show, and we prayed, Who
runs the Akron Civic Theater?
Yeah, Howard Parr, and now was running E.J. Thomas. So he booked it for E.J. Thomas. We put the tickets on sale at the beginning of January, and it sold out 2 weeks before the beginning of March. Mm. And I thought then the light bulb really went on. We did the show, and ever since that date, so it's 2 years, actually, tomorrow, since we did it, I have been changing it every time we do it. I have changed it, and I keep tweaking it and adjusting arrangements. And here we are. Well,
to do this, you have to get the buy-in by Richard Carpenter, right? Karen's brother, famous brother, and accompanist and arranger.
Right. Well, you actually don't. I mean, you can go and sing songs.
Okay.
But I didn't feel right doing something like this because I'm a musician and a songwriter and an arranger. I just didn't feel right. And so just after we spoke 9 or 10 years ago, I had the idea and I started playing with it, and I emailed Richard Carpenter's manager and eventually got through to him, and he sent me an email basically saying, go for it, good luck with the show.
It's interesting to listen to these different selections because, like, you take We've Only Just Begun.
Yeah.
Starts off it's a dead-on imitation of Karen. I mean, you've got her pacing, you've got the tremolo that she's got, a lot of subtle stuff going on, but then you kind of take off and do your own thing, right?
Yeah, and people ask me, we just did the show in New Jersey, and they said, do you try and copy her? And I say, nope, that is how I sing. If you listen to any of my albums, that's how I sing. But I listened to her very early on, and I'm the type of sort of music geek that I would listen to those albums 50 million times until I knew every single thing.
You really know them.
I really know them very well, yeah. Now, I haven't listened to them for a very long time, intentionally. And that's really how the fresh arrangements came about, because it's very hard otherwise to think out of the box. So I haven't listened to their albums probably for about 9 years.
Talk about the challenges of doing those arrangements. I imagine it was fun to do that, but it was also might not have been easy. What do you think?
Most of them came I don't believe in forcing things. It has to happen organically. Mm-hmm. And I am the sum of many parts. And I'm under no illusions that I did this on my own. I have an incredible team. My manager, Howard Parr, stepped on board 2 years ago and has been a super supportive part of this whole process. And then I have 4 amazing musicians who are also creators. But I would just come to the table and say, I was driving along in my car the other day and I found myself singing Close to You as a waltz. And it feels like it's just made to be a waltz. Why do birds suddenly appear every time? I mean, it just lends itself. Mm-hmm. And so I went to my music teacher, Professor David Morgan, and I sat with him at the piano and I said, am I abusing this song in any way? And he said, no, this is beautiful. So we did that, and then I took it to Joe Lehman, my musical director, who then arranged the harmonies. And it was really easy. Now, others were a little more last minute. We've only just begun. Joe Lehman arranged that. And I just think it's stunning. I Won't Last a Day Without You actually came from, I do a symphony version of that with an orchestra, which is amazing. And so David Hansen did that arrangement, and then we embellished it by adding some of the vocal arrangement, etc.
You've got this show at Playhouse Square. How are you weaving in the stories of Karen into the concert? Give us an example of that.
So what we do, when I originally did the show 9 years ago, it was chronological, and I told some stories. It didn't feel right. I've read every book, I've seen every movie, I've ordered all these movies that probably aren't even supposed to exist, been mailed to me from all corners of the earth, to do as much research as I could and to find those stories that are particularly interesting to the audience and about the songs. So, for example, Goodbye to Love. I tell them how Richard turned on the TV one night and tuned in, found a movie called Rhythm on the River starring Bing Crosby. It's all about a struggling songwriter and his greatest composition, Goodbye to Love. And Richard says, you never actually hear the song, they just keep talking about it. But sitting there, he thought, what a great title. And as a songwriter myself, I do that all the time. Somebody makes a comment, I'll write it down. So he starts working on this haunting melody. He gets together with John Bettis, his songwriting partner, and they finish the song. Then Richard imagines this really unusual electric guitar solo to happen in the middle and at the end of the song. Well, that's never happened. Nobody's ever done that before. Then they hire an even more unlikely, sort of tall, handsome, fop-head rock guitarist. And funnily enough, our guitarist in the band fits that model perfectly. And we did the same thing when we hired Charlie to be our guitarist. And his name's Tony Peluso. And he comes in and they say to him, we want you to play the melody for 2 measures and then rip into a solo. He had it done in 2 takes. It was one of the first, if not the first time, anybody had ever put an electric guitar solo in a ballad. And we think of that as being very normal nowadays. The Carpenters received hate mail. Nobody had ever done that before. Richard and Karen had put these 2 very differing worlds together. This sort of lush love song and this rock guitarist. And, hello, Led Zeppelin. And some people weren't ready for that, but then it also garnered them a whole bunch of new fans, which is why I see such a diverse range of people at the show. So those are the kinds of stories I tell.
And you've got a diverse range of people in your band,
Yes.
prominent group of area musicians, everyone from the Cleveland Jazz Orchestra, but also groups like Hey Mavis and even Herzog.
Yes. So it's so funny. It's almost what's the word I'm looking for, David? Duplicates the Carpenter story in some strange way. We were looking for a guitarist. That was our missing link. And I knew Charlie because we have taught before together. I've seen him in the room next door. And I didn't think for a minute he'd want to do this. He's our tall fop-head rock guitarist. Why would he want to do... He comes into the audition, he goes, "Oh, I love the Carpenters. My mum used to play the Carpenters." And he's fantastic. And when he does that solo, and we finish Act 1 with it, everybody goes nuts.
Even the harmony singing is emulating that style that Richard Carpenter put together, the very lush, multi-voiced thing. So that was even an important part for you.
Very important. I've always loved that, and that has to be because of my Carpenter's background. Even on my Spellbound album, there are harmonies everywhere. I love it. But I have to tell you, I Won't Last a Day Without You took Joe Lehman and I 4 hours to record just the harmonies. It was, and when we'd finished, our engineer put his hands on his head and he goes, "What did you two just do to me?" Because there's 12 voices at some point, and and some of it I was sight singing. So, and then we double up all those voices. Right. It was super fun, but it was a lot of work. And then of course everything has to be in tune. One line out of tune, and you have to do it again.
Even you even go to the extent of the cover of the CD. You're kind of sporting a Karen hairdo.
But that is my hair.
It is, but you've got that little curl thing going,
But that is... That really isn't intentional at all. That's my hair, I promise. Now the jumpsuit,
maybe so.
But it's the 2018 jumpsuit. Mm-hmm. I avoided the polyester chiffon thing. So I do have the jumpsuit for sure as my tip of the hat to Karen.
What are your hopes for the future of this show?
I am super flattered that David Green of Playhouse Square came to see the show last March and booked it for Playhouse Square this March. Northeast Ohio has really kind of taken me in as their own, and David Green and Gina Venesi have definitely been a huge part of that and my success. We are inviting some very prominent producers who are coming to see the show. I really have probably taken it as far as I can go without some producerial input now and financial backing. But the goal would be, I think it's we're already touring it around the country. We're now off to Minnesota and some cold places. Then we're off to the Carolinas. So we're touring it. But I would love it to become I call it a docu-musical or a boutique musical because it's not like Carole King's Beautiful. It's not telling the story.
Right.
I would love it to, I think it's a very tourable project, and I think it could be a very successful boutique musical in its own right. It could then be, I'd love to see it written for symphony orchestra and do it with an orchestra. I think there are so many amazing symphony orchestras around the country, and it would work in that environment beautifully too, because of the quality of the material. It works, and I know because I've tried it. It works with my 4-piece. It would work if I could expand it a little more and have perhaps 5 singers and a couple more instrumentalists. And it would work in an orchestral setting too. So it deserves to be at Playhouse Square and in Chicago in some big venues, but I'm super happy that I've been able to roll it out in some of these lovely theaters we've visited and seen the reaction of people.
Ever since you've landed on these shores, it seems like you put these projects together. I mean, you do albums, you put together stage presentations, and it's like you're a one-woman show almost, even though I know you've got a team of people that work with you, but you're the spark behind it. Where does that drive come from, do you imagine?
that's a really interesting question. You ask some great questions. You do. And funnily enough, Joe Lehman, my musical director, was asked that, and he goes, she just doesn't give up. And he goes, that just makes me drive even harder. David, I love what I do. And I am so lucky to do what I do for a living. It's sometimes difficult for some of the team around me who know that there needs to be some financial, confidence, right?
Exactly.
Because for me, this show is where it is and what it is because of how I feel about the music and how it needs to be treated. Yes, you could do other things with it and probably make gazillions of money, but that's not where it is in my heart. This needs to be respected. The music needs to be respected. The stories, it's about the music, not about Karen having anorexia, although it was desperately sad. I just don't feel we're focusing on what these two people were so fabulous at. And this is what this show does. And I think that I just love music. I live and breathe singing. And if I couldn't do that, then I think I'd just have to ride horses or something all day. But yeah, this is my passion.
Anything else you want to say about this project, about Karen Carpenter?
Well, the most important thing about our Playhouse Square show on March 31st at 3:30 is I think 2/3 of the theatre is sold out. So if you want to come, get your tickets soon. And then we are, of course, launching the CD. That's going to be the first place it's available. It's called Superstar, The Carpenters Reimagined, and it's gone to press today. So it will be there, and the whole team will be there to meet and greet after the show and sign the CDs and say hello to everybody. So it's going to be a really special day, and I'm very, very glad that I'm doing that here at home.
You're going to be playing drums on stage?
I'm not, no. Listen.
So you're not doing full Karen?
I'm playing a tambourine and I'm singing 21 songs and telling the stories. That's it. And then I'm having a large glass of wine afterwards.
I feel like we should. I'd like to use part of this interview for with Joe on Joe's show. Yeah. So let's do a little shout out to Joe. The Sound of Britain and Ireland were one of the first radio programs that you were on here when you got here.
Yes, that's right. You know, how could I forget? I'd only been here 10 days. And I came to Cleveland, and Doug had to drive me because I didn't even have a car at that moment. And I didn't have a driving license. And I met Joe and Kevin. I'd sent them a couple of recordings from England. They were so excited. I had the best time. And ever since, they have been my #1 supporters. And every time I've had a show or an album, I have come to see Joe, and of course our dear Kevin, who we lost last September. So now I'll be meeting Joe and Bruce, and I'm so glad I get to be with them.
Helen Welch, good to talk with you again.
Thank you, David.